back on PBS with a brand new special on inspiration, your ultimate calling. There'll be a lot about inspiration here tonight, inspiring people, inspiring events, how to live an inspired life, how to attract spirit back into your life. Lots of things that are going to be very powerful for you. I encourage you to stay with it and call everyone you know and tell them to watch. We need more inspiration in this world. People that have inspired me have been, my children have been a great inspiration to me. I have 8 of them, 6 daughters, yes, and 2 sons. And back in the 1960s, when I was studying for my doctoral studies in Detroit, at Wayne State University, I used to listen to music, and a group of kids came over to this country from a little town just outside of London called Liverpool. Some of you may have heard of them. And they used to sing a song, the Beatles did. It was called, Will You Still Want Me? Will you still love me? What? When I'm 64, right? And I used to think at that time in my 20s that I didn't really understand that song. I didn't think it would have any meaning at all. I thought no one even ought to be allowed to live that long. So it just didn't resonate to me. But then, lo and behold, it happened to me. Turned around and 64 was here. And I wasn't able to be with my children at the time of that birthday. I was speaking in Durham, North Carolina that night. So I got a package from them with a wonderful card in it for me. And I thought, you know, maybe all of this work that we've done with these children, with my wife and I, and trying to teach them about spirit and higher consciousness and loving and being close to God and spirit, was coming true, because they sent me this beautiful card. It said inside of this birthday card is a very special message from God. And I opened it up and it said, see you soon. Happy birthday. So, there it is. And my children have been a great source of inspiration to me. They have given me some of the best material I could ever have. I can remember one morning, I was making waffles for them, and I heard my my daughters talking to each other, and they were doing very slow, and I had what I thought was really important things to do, and I encouraged her and all of them to, you know, speed it up a little bit. You know, let's go. We've all got to get in the car. We've got deadlines. We've got to get to school. I've got to get to work. I'm a prophet. You know, I have to go think and walk the beach. I get paid by the thought, you see. So I raised my voice a little bit, and I said something, and my daughter Serena took umbrage at what I had said, and I said, come on, let's go, get working, let's go, move, come on, I want to get to school, we got to get you to school. And she just stood up and she put her hands on her hips and looked at me and said, I wonder what all those people would think of Mr. Positive if they could see him here this morning. She turned around and looked at her sister, Summer, and said, would you buy a book from someone who yells at his 10-year-old child? I write those down when they... So anyway, my children have always been great inspiration for me, and great teachers, and keep me very close to the ground and very humble. I want to begin this program on inspiration with a story about attitude and belief. Because basically, the idea of living an inspired life is one in which our attitudes become one of being in harmony with our source, with spirit. Not too long ago, I was honored by Yeshiva University, the Einstein School of Medicine, with a wonderful tribute. It was called the Einstein Award, that is given to people whose work exemplifies some of the sort of philosophical views, rather than just necessarily the scientific views of Albert Einstein. And I was invited there, and I gave a lecture to the staff and did rounds and spent a day there at this wonderful School of Medicine in psychiatric hospital in New York. But I felt that when I got there that maybe it would be important for me to explain to them about Einstein's theory of relativity, which I'm sure many of you watching don't really completely understand. But everything is really relative. I mean, there was a great Chinese philosopher who once said, his name was Lao Tzu, he said, I went to sleep and I dreamt that I was a butterfly. And then I awoke. And now I don't know. Am I a man who was dreaming that he was a butterfly? Or am I a butterfly dreaming that I'm a man? It could be either way. And Einstein said, it's all relative. It's all relative. And I thought about that, and I thought perhaps I could help these doctors and everyone to understand, since they were working at a place named after Dr. Einstein, I could explain to them about how to apply this theory. And I have a theory about relativity that goes like this. All things being relative, in a bowl of soup, this is a lot of hair. What do you think? Really? You understand? If you were in a restaurant and you ordered a bowl of soup and you got this much hair in it, you would call the waiter over and you would say, excuse me, what? That's a lot of hair. That's the way I look at it, all right? It's all relative, and it's all how you believe and what you believe. As we move into this idea of inspiration, I'd like to suggest to you that you have a mind that is open to everything and attached to nothing. It's not a program that's based on any religion or any particular view of spirit or God or soul. We can call it what we want. We all originate from the same source. This source acts in a certain way, is constantly creating. And whether you're a believer in one particular religious persuasion or another, all of us have to agree, even quantum physics teaches us, that we all originate in this divine place of an organizing intelligence. And Alan Watts, a great teacher, a man I admired enormously, once said that you can't get wet from the word water. The word itself, whether you call it water or vasa or aqua or Edna, it doesn't make any difference what you call it. It's the substance of what it is and not what we call something that I want you to pay attention to as we talk about spirit. And I'll use these terms interchangeably. Spirit, divine mind, organizing intelligence, God. All of these terms are terms that refer to the place from which we all came. And this idea of inspiration, if you look at the word inspiration, it breaks down to two words. In spirit. In spirit. And when we look at what it means to live an inspired life, it's nothing more, in my estimation, it's nothing more than finding a way for you to be in harmony with the spiritual essence from which you originated. Not just in your actions, not just in your feelings, and not just in your behaviors of attending church or being nice once in a while, in every single thought that you have. And I'd like to suggest to you that inspiration is not something that comes and goes. It's not something that you have one moment and then the next moment it disappears. And this is a whole new look at inspiration. To me, inspiration is living in spirit at all times and catching ourselves when we find ourselves disconnected from the spirit from which all of us emanated. It's really thinking like God. It's being more in touch with that place of origination. It doesn't come and go. When you live an inspired life, you begin to feel as if you're on purpose. I guarantee you that at the end of this show, you will not have to ask the question, what is my purpose, and how do I find it, and where is it, and how come I can't get it, and why does somebody else have it, and I don't seem to get it? It always seems to elude me. These will no longer be the issues that face you about being inspired. It's really about living day in and day out from this divine perspective of watching every single thought that we have and catching ourselves when we have a thought that is inconsistent with that divine source from which we all came. So that if you have a thought that includes you and your family, but excludes someone else and their family, no matter where they are in the universe, no matter where they are, no matter what they look like, no matter what side of the river they were born on, no matter what their cultural background might be, if you have a thought that includes some and excludes others at any time, you're not in spirit. You have left spirit and moved into something else, taking on a view of yourself as someone who is separated from your source. So that you watch yourself and you catch yourself, and a big part of this program will be about watching those thoughts. Many of you know that I had a very powerful and important teacher in my life when I was a young doctoral student. He was perhaps the most significant teacher in the professions of my life. He wrote a very important book back in the 1950s called Modern Man in Search of a Soul. His name was Carl Jung. And Carl Jung had others in his life who were students. And Carl Jung had others in his life who were students of his, and one of those was Abraham Maslow. And Dr. Maslow's work on self-actualization and higher consciousness and teaching people that if you want to help another human being, you always put your attention on what it is that they can do to improve rather than on what is wrong. So you don't talk about what is missing, what is wrong, what ought to be, what used to be, unless you want more of that to continue flowing into your life. You put your intention and your attention on what it is that you want to shift and change. And he had an observation. Maslow's observation was this. He said, what is necessary? What is necessary to change a person is to change his awareness of himself. So becoming inspired is really about changing your awareness of yourself. And what does this mean? It means shifting the belief systems that you might have, the thoughts that you've had over and over and over again that say, I am limited. I don't have the talent. I don't have the background. I don't have the luck that I need in order to be able to attract what I want into my life. Things have never worked out for me before. You change your awareness of yourself and your own body and what you believe about it. Like, how could you have a body that comes from a divine source that creates from well-being and have it be anything other than beautiful? Have it be anything other than divine? Have it be anything other than perfect? A perfect creation of God, of source, of spirit, is what it is that you carry around with you. And if you have any other thoughts about it, then you have to really work at shifting them, because it's an insult to that from which you came. When you trust in yourself, you're trusting in the very wisdom that created you. And inspiration is about having that. It is about recognizing yourself as a genius. recognizing yourself as a person of unlimited talent and the capacity to be able to do anything. And you'll be hearing a little bit later in this program stories about people who have taken exactly that attitude and said, there is absolutely nothing that I can't create if I can conceive of it in my mind and know that if I don't have the talent, that whatever talent is necessary, I can manifest it and have it show up and attract it into my life. Whatever financing is necessary, I have the ability to be able to connect myself to that. It's a knowing, it's a powerful knowing. I've been introduced a lot of times as the father of motivation. I don't know. First of all, I'm already the father of enough, all right? 8 is enough, all right? So I don't need another one named motivation to be the father of. And I'm also pretty aware that it's difficult to motivate anyone. I don't know that you really can motivate another human being. In the process of being a parent and then being a teacher, a school teacher at one time, a college professor, a lecturer all around the world, teaching on larger stages and smaller stages, and working with my own family and so on, I really kind of think that we come into this world and we have an agenda that we need to fulfill, and that the best intentions of somebody else wanting them for you isn't enough to motivate them. It has to come from within. And I think you can provide some guidance and you can provide some motivation, perhaps in the way of encouragement and being a model of what it is that you'd like people to do. But two people can be raised in the very same family and have the identical experiences, and one of them can go one way and one goes completely another way. I know it's true in my own family as well. So that if motivation is getting a hold of an idea and taking this idea to its logical conclusion and not letting anything interfere with that, that's motivation. And we say a motivated person doesn't allow obstacles to show up in their life and doesn't allow for anyone to interfere with them, and is really highly directed towards a particular goal. So motivation is getting a hold of an idea and carrying it out. And we want to think of ourselves as motivated, and I think it comes from within. If that's what motivation is, inspiration is the exact opposite. Inspiration is when an idea gets a hold of you and takes you where you were originally intended to go in the first place. It's very different than motivation. The great playwright Arthur Miller, most of you had to read one of his plays at one time or another in high school or in college. Death of a Salesman being, of course, one of the most famous, The Crucible, and so on. Arthur Miller was passed away recently, but he was 88 years old, and he had another play on Broadway at the age of 88. And he was asked the question in an interview in the New York Times, are you working on another play? And his answer really intrigued me. He said, I don't know, but I probably am. Now, I think that that's really a very astute observation. When people ask me if I'm working on another book, I often say the same thing. I probably am. That there's something bigger. There's something that is greater in our lives. And when we connect to it, we allow it to take us where we were intended to go when we signed up for this whole visit in the first place, called our incarnation into being a human form for this little parentheses in eternity. Just a little parentheses in eternity. I have one of my very favorite observations of this subject about inspiration from a story written about a man named Wolfgang Amadeus, what? Mozart, of course. It's from an essay, Where Madness is Psyche's Only Nurse, it's called. It seems a would-be composer came to Mozart seeking his advice. How do I write symphonies, he asked. Mozart replied, well, you're young yet. I think you should begin by composing minuets. The young man was greatly annoyed and exclaimed, "But you were writing symphonies when you were only 9 years old." "Yes," Mozart responded, "but I didn't ask anyone how to do it." Now, the writer of this essay goes on to say that the most agonizing thing about this little Mozart story is that Mozart was not speaking from inflation, but from simple, truthful modesty. The reason Mozart didn't have to ask anyone how to write symphonies is that symphonies presented themselves to him, invented, enlarged, produced all at once in what he described as lively dreams. Dreams that were so forceful that Mozart had to stop doing what he was doing, otherwise, and write out what he heard, almost as if something beyond Mozart's consciousness desired these symphonies to be written. Now, that is very, very powerful teaching, that these great symphonies that Mozart wrote presented themselves to him, and he couldn't stop it. Do you know, you don't have to be a Mozart to be in spirit. You can find your calling by just being willing to listen, by just being willing to be someone who knows that it may not be in the writing of a symphony that you're called to. It could be anything. It could be the adoption of a child. It could be the creation of something that you've known you wanted to write for your whole life. It could be opening up a business. It could be raising horses out in Montana. It could be anything that you are called to do. So that the awareness that I'm asking you to look at is that there is something that is calling you. And when an idea gets a hold of you, you get into this place of surrender, where you let go. In the recovery movement, we've always called this, you let go and what? And you let God. You allow this great spirit to be something that infuses you in such a way that it becomes this thing bigger than your life, that propels you into directions that you're willing to listen to. But you gotta change your awareness of yourself, as Maslow said. And one of the ways that you change your awareness of yourself is to understand a very simple premise. Think of an apple pie. Here's an apple pie, and this apple pie, you take this apple pie and you take a slice of this apple pie and you put it over here. And then you walk over to the slice and you say to the apple pie, the slice of apple pie, "What are you like? What are you like?" And the little slice of apple pie says, "I must be like what I came from." You wouldn't expect it to be pineapple. You wouldn't expect it to be cherry. You would expect it to be like what it came from, right? So why is it that we understand this, and yet we don't understand that we too must be like what we came from? We are pieces of God. We came from a divine source. We have to trust in our divinity. We have to understand that we are not this package of bones and skin encapsulating, these internal organs, that's not who we are. That's what we call the false self. It's an illusion. That who we really are is what we came from. And what we came from is eternal, it's infinite, it's kind, it's unlimited, it excludes no one. So that if we understand that we are really here as spiritual beings, just having a human experience, not the other way around. We're not human beings having a spiritual experience, it's the other way around. Our essence is our greatness, what we came from. We must be like what we came from. I've just taken up this new practice. It's called yoga. Now, I'm 65 years old, and I've decided that There are certain things that I was told that I couldn't do at earlier stages of my life that I've decided I'm taking on. I don't care what my age is or what anybody else has told. What Mrs. McConnell told me in the 6th grade at Marquette Elementary School in Detroit, that you don't have to come to art class. It's really not for you. You can go dribble basketballs maybe, but you don't want to come to art. This is because she saw some of my stick drawings that I was pretty proud of. And then there was Mr. Tubbs at Denby High School in Detroit, who, when I turned in my first drawing in drafting class, I didn't even know what drafting was. When I just signed, they threw me in there because the school was so overcrowded. It was my elective. And I turned in my first drawing, and he asked me the question, "Do you have a little sister?" Like in the 3rd grade, because she perhaps is the one that did this way. That was my whole view of my artistic ability. I'm out there painting now. I'm doing painting. And I'm also doing yoga, all right? And I've learned some things about myself in the process of doing this. Like the last time I touched my forehead to my ankles, I think I was 4 months old. And I'm getting closer. Now, I'm not there, all right? But I'm getting a little bit closer. Each time I do one of these poses, I find myself a little bit closer. And I had a sort of a semi-belief that I couldn't touch my toes while sitting up straight with my back straight up and sitting down and touch my toes without my knees bending. And I back straight up and sitting down and touch my toes without my knees bending. And I kept each day going in there and not being able to do that. The knees were up, and the instructor said, "You can do this." And I said, "Well, it doesn't seem like my body agrees with that. But it would be..." And so he came over and he said, "Now I'm going to show you that you really can do this. Now keep your back straight." And he took his foot and he went like this, down on my knees. And my knees went down and I was sitting up. And the first time I had ever been able to do, it was like a change in attitude, a shift, a belief system that I no longer was hanging on to. And that's what we have to do. It doesn't matter what your age is. It doesn't matter what your beliefs have been. It doesn't matter what other people have tried to convince you of in the past. When you move into spirit and have a knowing that I have the capacity to be able to do this, you leave behind the false self. And the false self is really nothing more than this ego. Look, you came from a divine place that is unlimited, that says you can be anything you put your attention on. And then you bought into a whole series of beliefs that were handed to you by very well-meaning people attempting to convince you that you had limitations, that you couldn't do this, that this wasn't possible. And I'd like to suggest to you that you took on something called an ego. E-G-O, an ego. You came in from divinity, you came in from a place of unlimited, you show up and you edged God out. E-G-O. And when you edge God out, it doesn't mean that you're sacrilegious. It doesn't mean that you're not a moral person. It means that you take on a belief system that says, who I am is no longer this infinite divine being who can step outside and observe this body and believe that he can make it do whatever I put my attention on and use it to have the same powers that is spoken about in the New Testament. Even the least among you can do all that I have done, and even greater things. It's within each and every one of us, except that we bought into an idea that who we are is what we have, who we are is what we do, who we are is what other people think I am, who I am is separate from everybody else, who I am is separate from what I would like to attract into my life, and who I am is separate from my source. And we believe in this separation, and we believe in this identity that who I am is what I have. So we start accumulating. We accumulate and accumulate and accumulate. The problem is that when you stop accumulating, and if who you are is what you accumulate, then you have no value as soon as your things start to disappear, as soon as they wear out, as soon as somebody else takes them, as soon as the government taxes them, as soon as any number of things. Who I am is what I do. If you no longer can do, then you aren't. You no longer exist. Who I am is my reputation, and we raise our children often to believe that what's most important is what other people think of you. Fit in. Do what you've been told to do. Do what the crowd does. Follow the herd. And you know what happens, what you step in when you follow the herd. So we take on all of these sort of false ideas, and we have a tendency to believe them. And inspiration is moving back into spirit, and it's moving back into spirit in such a way that you no longer accept yourself as anything other than divine. A Persian poet from back in the ancient times in the 13th century, his name was Jalaluddin Rumi. And Rumi has this observation that's been very important and very powerful to me. He said, "The morning breeze has secrets to tell you. Do not go back to sleep." Let me say it again. The morning breeze has secrets to tell you. Do not go back to sleep. I'd like to take a poll. Just by a show of hands, I'd like to ask how many people in this room, and there's about 3,000 of us here tonight, I'd like to ask you, how many of you awaken at one time or another between the hours of 3 and 4 a.m.? Let me just see by a show of hands. And if you look around, you see that this is a universal experience. Now, what do you think that is? If everybody, almost everybody, awakens at some time between 3 and 4. Now, for some of us, we just interpret that as, all right, this is my age. I'll just run into the bathroom and I'll be right back. And you may make that visit several times a night. I don't know. But there's more to that. And I'd like you to, now of all of those people who raised their hand at this idea that you awaken sometime between 3 and 4 a.m., how many of you awaken at exactly the same time? Exactly the same time, with a little digital clock next to you. What is your time? 3:18. What is your time? 2:20. What is yours? 4:50. So like there's a, and this happens repeatedly over and over again. My time is 3:13. I awaken at 3:13 night after night after night. I look over, I've got this little clock. It's not an alarm clock, it's just a little digital clock. I just look over and it's 3:13 again and again and again. So what I had trained myself to do in the writing of this book, in the inspiration book, is to put my feet on the floor and say to myself, all right, you are going to awaken because here's what Rumi said, the morning breeze has secrets to tell you. Do not go back to sleep. You realize that between 3 and 4 o'clock in the morning, in the middle of the night, this is the time when you're closest to your source. This is the time when it's the quietest. It is the time when it's the most peaceful, when there are the least distractions. And of course in Miracles it says the memory of God comes to the quiet mind. It cannot come where there is conflict. A mind at war with itself remembers not eternal gentleness. Eternal gentleness. That's what you came from. It beckons you back to be awake. It's the most creative time in your life. Try it. Take that moment that you are being called by your source and awaken, and force yourself to shake the cobwebs out. And if you can't, then put your feet on the floor and say, look, if I have to go back to sleep, I'm going to sleep with my feet on the floor. And after a while, that gets very uncomfortable, and you'll get yourself up. Now, when I do that, and I get up, and I live on Maui, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank all of you for my beautiful home that I have on Maui. And when I get up at that is the most glorious time to be out there. And I go out onto the lanai, and I get this sense of this powerful feeling of inspiration. It's overwhelming to me. And I walk by my writing table, and it pulls me. It's pulling me towards it. It's almost beckoning me and saying, please, please come to me. I want you to, and I sit there sometimes, and I literally wonder, where is this coming from? The words, they just flow, and I sit there, and I write by hand. And as I'm writing, and allowing this to flow through my heart and onto the pages, I just think to myself, I wonder what's going to come next. I wonder when it's going to come next. It's almost as if God is saying, this is why you're here. And I can't get you any other time because it's just so busy, and there's horns bonked, and there's so many distractions. But here's a time when you can just be with me. Just be in spirit. Just be inspired, inspirado. Be in this space with me. And I will then allow what creative juices that you have forgotten about because you edged me out for so much a part of your life. And here it is. And you'll find yourself getting the right ideas, examining things that you never thought of before. Writing, some of you, I know you do it in your sleep many times. You'll write a poem and it'll be so phenomenal. And then you'll say, well, I'll remember that tomorrow. And then you get up and you can't get any of it. The morning breeze has secrets to tell you. Do not go back to sleep. Use those hours. And forget about the idea that, let's see now, I went to bed at 11. And if I get up at 3, that means 4 hours, so I'm going to be 4 hours deficient all day long. I'm not going to be... Forget that. You've got an eternity to sleep. An eternity to sleep. And when you learn to meditate and get quiet and get peaceful, you can always, in 20 minutes of time of meditation, any time during the day, get the equivalent of a full night's sleep. Don't go back to sleep. I'd like to speak in this program about what I call the rewards for inspiration. Things that will be your payoffs, your prizes, if you decide to move into spirit, into this world of spirit that I'm speaking about here on PBS. Back in the 2,300 or so years ago, we're not quite sure exactly when, there was a great teacher in India. His name was Patanjali. And in all the research that I've done on Patanjali, there's not sure if it was one person or a series of people or whatever it is, but it's great teachings, and I've immersed myself in the discourses of Patanjali and the sutras and practiced it. And one of the things that Patanjali, who was teaching people about being miracle workers at that time, teaching them about things that no one had ever heard about before, about the power of the repetition of the sound of the name of God as a way of manifesting something into your life, teaching people about being invisible, stuff that's a little bit strange, but that's, you know, it's like being 65 has its advantages, you know, because I can talk about things that are weird. I usually point it out so you don't think I don't know that this might sound a little strange. But I would like to suggest to you that he offered something about inspiration that I want to offer to you. And there are 6 of these things, and I want to cover each one of them in this program. He said, when you are inspired by some great purpose, some extraordinary project, all of your thoughts break their bonds. Your mind transcends limitations. 3, your consciousness expands in every direction. And 4, you find yourself in a new and a great and a wonderful world. Dormant forces, faculties, and talents come alive. And 6, you discover yourself to be a greater person by far than you ever dreamed yourself to be. Those are the rewards. It's not like you're going to win the lottery. It's not, you may. It's not that somebody's going to come riding into your life on a white horse or whatever. These are the rewards. These are the things that are going to be so powerful for you. The first of these is what? When you are inspired by some great purpose, some extraordinary project, 1, all of your thoughts break their bonds. All of your thoughts break their bonds. What do we mean by your bonds? Your bonds are the thoughts that you have that keep you disconnected from your source. They are thoughts that are out of harmony with spirit, with God consciousness, with God realization. Because this is basically about being like God, being like Source, being like Spirit, being like Divine Mind, in everything, in every thought, in every action, more and more, connecting yourself back, catching yourself. So, the bonds are the ways that we think. I'd like you to imagine a ladder. And this ladder has 10 rungs on it, from the floor all the way up to the top of the ladder. And at the top of the ladder is the highest rung. And at the top of the ladder are the words, "This is my desire," and it's aligned with Spirit. Again, this is my desire, and it's aligned with Spirit. So what is your desire? My desire is to with Spirit. So what is your desire? My desire is to manifest abundance into my life, perfectly aligned. We came from an abundant source. My desire is to feel a sense of well-being in my body at all times, perfectly aligned. My desire is to have divine spiritual relationships in my life. My desire is to get the job that I am working towards getting. My desire is to live in a place where I feel most peaceful and most loving. My desire is, and these, whatever it is, it doesn't make any difference. It's the 10th rung. It's the highest rung. It is your spirit aligned with your desire. All right? So here it is. It's right up here. Now you have to ask yourself the question, what is it that I offer up to this 10th rung desire? All right? A 10th rung has to have, in order for it to manifest and show up in your life, it has to have thoughts, feelings, and behaviors that match up to that. And if they don't match up, you get out of harmony. See, thoughts are energy. Like everything in the universe, it's energy. Einstein said that nothing happens until something moves. That we have has an energy component to it. We can measure our thoughts and how they impact us, whether they strengthen us or weaken us at any time in our lives. All right, so there's a wonderful book written about this, and it's called Ask and It Is Given. I read frequently, and great teachings, I think among the greater teachings on the planet today. In fact, I wrote the foreword to it. It's something that I very strongly embrace. And they talk in there about how to manifest your desires. And the mistake that most of us make is that we attract what we don't want because our thoughts are on what we don't want. Or we continue to attract what's missing in our life. We're not at number 10, we're at about number 3. And what are some of these on these lower rungs? It probably won't happen. It's very difficult. These kinds of things have never happened for me before. I don't have this kind of luck. We've got the wrong people in the White House. The economy is bad. I don't have the ability to make it happen. I don't really believe it's possible. She said, well, of course. Who wouldn't want to be rich? We all want to have abundance in our life, of course that. I said, so let me see if I understand this. You want to attract being rich into your life, and your thought about it is that it'll never happen. So what do you think you're going to attract? You're going to attract, it'll never happen. And that very simple little example, it's an innocuous example. She was a very bright and intelligent lady. It wasn't about that. It's about what kind of energies we have within ourselves that we offer to what our desires that are aligned with Spirit in order for them to manifest. And every thought, if you have a second wrong thought that it probably won't happen, it's not likely, it's never happened before, it's just not the way it works for me, It's always been missing. As long as you think like that, and you're in a universe that operates on this law of attraction, you